This is Father Andrew Ritchie, and you're listening to Catholic Inspiration, a podcast from my website at studyprayserve.com. These homilies, presentations, and retreats form part of my ministry as a Catholic priest for the Diocese of Superior. And now I invite you to open your hearts to some Catholic inspiration. Today is Wednesday of the 24th week of the year. Our Gospel reading is Luke chapter 7, verses 31 to 35. Jesus said to the crowds, "To what shall I compare the people of this generation? What are they like? They are like children who sit in the marketplace and call to one another. We played the flute for you, but you did not dance. We sang a dirge, but you would not weep. For John the Baptist came neither eating food nor drinking wine, and you said, 'He's possessed by a demon.' The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you said, 'Look, he's a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.' But wisdom is vindicated by all her children." Grandpa used to say about certain people who were always complaining that they'd complain if they were hung with a new rope. I remember that just all the time. Yeah, there are certain people who, no matter what you do, they're going to complain, grumble, whine. They're going to make it clear that they found what was wrong. Now, do you know people like that? But more importantly, have you ever been like that? Maybe you're in a bad mood. Maybe something got under your skin. Maybe you just were the right circumstances and everything falls apart. You see, what I want to highlight today is what Jesus is pointing out here are those times in life when we are seeking only what is wrong and not open to how we need to change, adapt for what is good. In other words, for the times when we grumble. The fear is that if we don't address the grumbling, we can become a grumble. That's our existence. Whining, complaining, grousing, murmuring, finding fault, never happy, always stuck in this negative feedback loop. That's toxic. Friends, I, as a parish priest, I interact with a lot of people in a lot of circumstances. And while it's understood that there are days that we can have a really bad day and we just need a little time to work it out, but I'm talking about something that's continuous, something that begins to become ingrained, something that becomes the way we think and then speak and then act. It's a toxic hell where we're always finding fault, and get this, never looking at ourselves. The fault is always at something else. John the Baptist is coming, preaching repentance, and people aren't looking at the repentance in some cases. They're saying, look, he's possessed. Jesus comes, preaching repentance, but meeting people where they're at, talking about the good news, speaking about forgiveness, reconciliation, loving one's enemies. And they say, look, he's a drunkard, he's a glutton, he's hanging out with those sinners. When we fall into the trap of grumbling, what we're doing is we're looking at the problem outside ourselves. We're not looking at ourselves as part of the problem. And so the invitation today, if we see that in ourselves, if we see that in something around us, what a great thing to take to prayer. That immediately, if we recognize in ourselves that we are contributing to the problem because we are pointing out, we're complaining, we're murmuring, grumbling, grousing, whining, but we're not doing anything to fix it, resolve it, heal it, bring about reconciliation, then we need to have our own come to Jesus moment, whether that's on our knees in our private prayer or go into confession. And if we see it in the larger context of our lives, if we see it in a relationship or circumstances, we got a couple of options. One, if there's a relationship there and we see someone going into a real negative loop, we can call it out. We say, hey, look, I love you, but this is destructive. This is toxic. This is not helping. In other words, we can walk with somebody and give them a different way of looking at things by raising their awareness and seeing what's going on. But sometimes we might see that the circumstance is deeply ingrained. It might be a whole culture. Well, then we have to take stock as to how do we live, work, interact without getting mired in all of this muck. That requires a lot of wisdom, and it's absolutely essential we bring that to our prayer. Sometimes we might be in situations, I think like certain work environments or relationships, where it's just toxic. People are going to complain no matter what. Well, then, if we can't call it out, if we can't help make it better, we might have to step out of the situation altogether, or at least distance ourselves so that we're keeping things civil, we're keeping it professional, but we're not getting emotionally involved, because if we do, we become poisoned with the same kind of negativity. By calling it out here, Jesus makes it clear that the behavior of the complaining by itself is not enough. Once we see that there's a problem, then we have to respond. We have to be part of the solution, recognizing what we might need to change or how we might need to interact with others. And sometimes we can do that on our own, but most of the time, this is a great thing to take to our daily prayer. Asking the Lord to help us see clearly into our hearts and then into our lives, that we might be guided by God's grace to take the gift of our faith and put it into practice as we interact with those around us. God bless you all. This is Father Andrew, and I hope this podcast inspires your faith. Now, if you found it helpful, please share it with a friend, and you can help me by leaving a rating and a review. I keep all my listeners in my daily prayers, and I ask for your prayers in return. God bless you, my friends.